he broke protocol. The manager's voice shattered the peaceful morning air of Paradise Cove's exclusive beach. Behind him, a young lifeguard, still dripped with water, cradling a coughing child in his arms, while wealthy guests watched from their premium loungers. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for the guard's career. But Jake Marshall didn't care. He'd do it again in a heartbeat. What he didn't notice was the muscular figure in designer sunglasses who had stopped his morning walk to watch the scene unfold, his expression darkening with each word from the manager's mouth. Paradise Cove wasn't just any beach, it was a sanctuary for the ultra-wealthy, where annual memberships cost more than most people's homes. Every grain of sand was curated, every wave seemed choreographed, and even the seagulls appeared to have received etiquette training. The lifeguard towers weren't the typical red and white stations. They were elegant teak structures that didn't disturb the aesthetic. And Jake had just committed the cardinal sin. He'd acted without waiting for the proper authorization chain, diving in to save a child without filing the required incident pre-approval form. The crowd of impeccably dressed guests had formed a perfect circle around the scene, their reactions split between horrified whispers and incredulous stares. Some clutched their designer beach bags closer, as if unemployment was contagious. Others watched with growing discomfort as the manager continued his tirade, his face reddening beneath his expensive resort-branded polo. None of them knew that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who had been enjoying a rare private vacation, was about to teach everyone a lesson about what really matters in life. Jake Marshall had never wanted to work at Paradise Cove. The exclusive resort's reputation for treating its staff like decorative props was well known among local lifeguards, but the pay was triple the standard rate, and his mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. So he donned the resort's custom-tailored uniform, cream-colored shorts and a polo that cost more than his weekly grocery budget, and learned to smile politely while checking membership cards before allowing anyone to step onto their beach. The boy had been small, maybe 6 or 7, his water wings slipping off as he flailed in the deep end of the swimming area. Jake had seen the subtle signs of drowning too many times to hesitate. The vertical position, the head tilted back, the quiet struggle that most people wouldn't even notice. The manager's precious protocol required radio confirmation, supervisory approval, and a liability waiver from the parents. By then, the boy would have been beyond saving. The child's mother stood trembling nearby, her designer sundress soaked from hugging her son. She kept mouthing, "Thank you," while her husband argued with other guests about response procedures and proper club etiquette. Some things, Jake knew, were worth losing a job over. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Resort manager Bradley Winston's voice dripped with cold fury as he stepped closer to Jake, designer loafers grinding against the pristine sand. "This is Paradise Cove. We have procedures. We have standards. We have a reputation to maintain." He gestured dramatically at the gathering crowd of wealthy onlookers as if they were Exhibit A in his prosecution. The other resort staff had materialized like well-trained ghosts. Maintenance workers suddenly finding urgent work nearby, waiters slowly collecting empty glasses from surrounding tables, security personnel maintaining a careful distance while speaking quietly into their earpieces. Everyone knew how this would end. Paradise Cove didn't tolerate deviations from protocol, no matter the reason. A murmur rippled through the crowd as several guests raised their phones, recording the confrontation. Bradley noticed and straightened his polo shirt, clearly playing to his audience now. "This isn't some public beach where you can just do whatever you want. Our members pay for perfection, for order, for watching kids drown." The deep voice cut through the tension like a thunderclap. Heads turned as Dwayne Johnson stepped through the crowd, which parted instinctively before his presence. He'd removed his sunglasses, and his eyes held the same intensity that had made him famous, first in the wrestling ring and later on the big screen. But this wasn't a movie scene. The barely contained anger in his expression was absolutely real. Bradley's face went through a rapid series of transformations: shock, recognition, calculation, and finally a desperate attempt at a professional smile. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for this disruption to your stay. I assure you we're handling this personnel matter with—" Personnel matter? The Rock's voice carried the weight of every hero he'd ever played, but this was no script. "I just watched this young man save a child's life while you worried about paperwork." He moved to stand beside Jake, his muscular frame making the manager look almost comically small. "You know, I've been coming here for years, keeping a low profile, watching. And I've seen some things that made me question this place's priorities. But this?" He gestured at the still shaking child and mother. "This crosses a line." The phones recording the scene multiplied as resort guests sensed something legendary unfolding. Paradise Cove was about to learn what real strength looked like. Bradley Winston had built his career on managing situations. He'd handled demanding celebrities, entitled billionaires, and even the occasional natural disaster with the kind of smooth efficiency that had made Paradise Cove the most exclusive resort in the country. But nothing in his 20 years of hospitality management had prepared him for this moment. Standing on his own beach, watching his authority crumble, while Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson systematically dismantled everything he stood for. "Let me tell you what real luxury is," The Rock continued, his voice carrying effortlessly across the now silent beach. "Real luxury isn't about fancy towels or expensive protocols. It's about knowing your kids are safe. It's about having people around you who'll do the right thing, no matter what it costs them." He turned to address the gathering crowd directly, his years of commanding audiences evident in every gesture. "How many of you are parents? How many of you would want someone to wait for paperwork while your child was drowning?" The murmur that went through the crowd was decidedly uncomfortable. Several of the guests who had been nodding along with Bradley's tirade earlier were now looking at their feet. The mother of the rescued boy stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "My son would be dead if he had followed your protocols. Dead." The word hung in the air like an indictment. Jake stood quietly, still dripping water, his posture straight, despite the gravity of his situation. He'd accepted the consequences of his choice the moment he'd seen that child struggling in the water. But now, watching The Rock articulate everything he'd felt in his heart, he realized this had become about something much bigger than his job. "Mr. Johnson," Bradley attempted to regain control, his voice taking on the practiced smoothness of crisis management. "While we certainly appreciate the sentiment, you have to understand that without proper procedures, the liability issues alone—" "Let me tell you about liability." The Rock's interruption was calm, but carried the same intensity that had made millions lean forward in their theater seats. "I've worked in entertainment for over 20 years. You know what the biggest liability is? Not the paperwork, not the protocols. It's forgetting our humanity. That's what kills careers. That's what destroys reputations." He turned to face the gathering crowd, which had grown as resort guests abandoned their poolside loungers and massage appointments to witness the unfolding drama. "I've seen the videos that come out of places like this, the viral posts about how the ultra-wealthy treat people. You think a drowned child wouldn't sink this place faster than a lifeguard doing his job?" Several members of the resort's board of directors, recognizable by their distinctive membership pins, were now huddled at the edge of the crowd, frantically whispering among themselves. One was already on the phone, gesturing animatedly, while glancing between The Rock and the still-dripping lifeguard. Bradley's face had taken on a peculiar shade of gray as he realized the situation was spiraling far beyond a simple disciplinary action. The subtle shift in the crowd's energy was unmistakable. Designer sunglasses were being raised to foreheads, phones were being aimed at him rather than Jake, and the whispers had taken on a distinctly critical tone. A young woman in a Valentino swimsuit stepped forward from the crowd, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being heard. "I'm on the Paradise Cove membership committee," she announced, removing her oversized sunglasses. "And I have to say, Mr. Winston, I'm disturbed by what I'm seeing here. My children swim in that pool every day." The ripple effect was immediate. Other committee members and longtime guests began to speak up, their previous silence shattering like a broken mirror. A distinguished older gentleman wearing a Rolex that could have paid Jake's salary for a year cleared his throat. "My grandchildren were here last week. Are you saying if something had happened to them, the lifeguard would have needed to wait for paperwork?" The Rock nodded appreciatively at the growing chorus of voices. He'd seen this moment coming, when people of privilege realized that some things transcended status, that some rules needed to be broken. Bradley was no longer just facing a disobedient employee or even an angry celebrity. He was watching his carefully cultivated world of exclusive luxury turn against him. Jake finally spoke, his voice quiet but unwavering. "I took this job because I believe in saving lives. That's what a lifeguard does. If you want someone to prioritize paperwork over a drowning child, you'll need to find someone else." The simplicity of his statement seemed to cut through all the complexity Bradley had tried to build around the situation. The board member on the phone was now walking briskly toward them, his face set with the grim determination of someone about to make a very expensive decision. The board member arrived at their circle of tension, his phone still in his hand. He was older, with the weathered tan of someone who practically lived at the resort. His membership pin was platinum, marking him as one of the founding members. "Bradley," he said, his tone carrying decades of authority, "the board has convened an emergency virtual session. We're watching this situation deteriorate in real time on social media." The Rock raised an eyebrow, his expression carrying a hint of satisfaction. "Social media moves faster than your protocols, doesn't it?" Bradley's attempt at a confident smile had devolved into something more akin to a grimace. "Sir, I can explain everything. This employee directly violated—" "Saved my son's life." The mother's voice cracked through the air again. She stepped forward, her earlier trembling replaced by righteous anger. "My son is alive because he didn't follow your precious protocols. Do you understand that? Do you have children, Mr. Winston?" The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Bradley's silence was answer enough. "I do," the Rock said, his voice softening for the first time. "And let me tell you something I learned from being a father. Rules exist to protect people, not to put them in danger. When a rule does more harm than good, that's not order. That's not luxury. That's just fear wrapped in expensive clothing." The board member nodded slowly, his eyes moving between Jake, still standing tall despite his soaked uniform, and Bradley, whose perfectly pressed polo shirt suddenly seemed like costume jewelry next to the Rock's authentic presence. The board member cleared his throat. "Recently, we've been discussing Paradise Cove's image problem, the perception that we value exclusivity over humanity. Today's incident, and now this viral moment." He gestured at the forest of phones still recording. "Mr. Johnson is right. Some things matter more than protocols." Bradley's face flushed with desperation. "But the liability, the insurance requirements, the membership standards—" "I've heard enough." The Rock's voice had the finality of a judge's gavel. "Let me tell you about standards. I started with nothing, worked my way up from $7 in my pocket to where I am now. You know what I learned? True class isn't about keeping people out, it's about lifting people up." He turned to address the crowd directly, his natural charisma drawing everyone in closer. "You all chose this place because it promises the best. But what's better? A resort that lets a child drown by the rules, or one that breaks the rules to save a life." The founding board member stepped forward. "Paradise Cove needs to change, starting now." He faced Bradley, whose expression suggested He was watching his career dissolve before his eyes. We're not just a playground for the wealthy, we're part of a community. And if we've lost sight of that, then maybe we need new leadership, leadership that understands the difference between protocol and principle. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. The mother hugged her son tighter, tears streaming down her face. Jake stood straighter, feeling the weight of judgment lifting from his shoulders. The founding member turned to Jake, his expression softening. "Young man, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. Not only will you keep your job, but we'd like to promote you to head of water safety. We need someone with your values to help us rewrite our protocols, putting life first." A spontaneous burst of applause broke out among the guests. The young woman from the membership committee was already typing rapidly on her phone, no doubt sharing the story with her extensive social network. The mother whispered something to her son, who broke free from her embrace and ran to hug Jake's legs. The Rock placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "See, that's real strength right there. Not doing what's easy, but doing what's right. Every time." He turned to Bradley, who had shrunk into himself as his authority evaporated. "You might want to update your resume. I hear there's an opening at a pool supply store downtown. Lots of protocols there." The crowd's laughter was cut short by a small voice. The rescued boy looked up at the Rock, his eyes wide with recognition. "Are you really the Rock?" The tension of the moment dissolved into genuine warmth as Dwayne knelt down to the child's level. "Yeah, buddy, I am. But you know who the real hero is? This man right here?" He gestured to Jake. "Because he knows something that everyone needs to remember. Rules are important, but life is precious. And sometimes being brave means being willing to break the rules to do what's right." The following week saw Paradise Cove transformed. The sleek, automated gates now bore a new sign: "Where luxury meets humanity." Jake's promotion came with an office, the same one Bradley had used to write his strict protocols. But instead of the former manager's framed policy documents, the walls now displayed safety certificates and a large photo of Jake with Dwayne Johnson and the rescued boy. The story had exploded across social media, with celebrities and influencers sharing their own experiences about choosing between rules and righteousness. The Rock's Instagram post about the incident had garnered millions of likes, featuring a selfie with Jake and the caption, "Real heroes don't wait for permission to do what's right. Proud to witness this man's courage." Life over protocol. Paradise Cove changed. Jake's first act as head of water safety was to establish a new primary protocol framed prominently in the resort's lobby. "In matters of life and safety, act first. We'll handle the paperwork later." The board unanimously approved it within hours. The incident sparked a wider conversation about luxury resorts and their priorities. Other exclusive venues began reviewing their own procedures, with several reaching out to Jake for consultation. Paradise Cove's membership, rather than declining as Bradley had feared, saw a surge of applications from families who valued the resort's new commitment to human life over rigid protocols. The boys' family became regulars at the resort, but not just for the amenities. Every weekend, their son took swimming lessons from Jake, who had started a water safety program for local children regardless of their family's membership status. The Rock made surprise appearances at these lessons whenever his schedule allowed, teaching kids that true strength meant standing up for what's right. Bradley found work at a corporate training center, where he ironically became known for his seminars on "When Rules Need Breaking, Lessons from Paradise Cove." His presentations always began with a simple question: what's more expensive, a broken rule or a lost life? 1 year later, Paradise Cove hosted a special event celebrating their new safety program. The Rock stood at the podium, looking out at a crowd that mixed luxury resort members with local families. Jake sat in the front row, next to the boy he'd saved, and dozens of other children wearing safety first, protocol second, swim team shirts. "You know what real luxury is?" Dwayne asked the crowd, his voice carrying the same conviction from that fateful day. "It's knowing that in this world of rules and regulations, there are still people who'll do the right thing, people who understand that every life is precious, regardless of membership status or social standing." He gestured to Jake and the children. "This is what success looks like. Not a protocol followed, but a life saved. Not an image maintained, but a community built." Raising a glass of water, he smiled. "To Paradise Cove, where we learned that the most valuable thing in life isn't what we keep out, but what we let in." The applause that followed wasn't just for a speech. It was for a lesson that had changed not just a resort, but an entire perspective on what truly matters in life.